Hey, welcome to the super fast sew along for the Kindle sleeves. Now I have two Kindles here. Mine is a Paperwhite and I use a pop socket and a clear case, which is why the sleeves are perfect, because I just like to throw mine in everywhere. So these are perfecto. Now my daughter has this is an older generation one. I think this is the kids version as well. She has a cover, but just showing you size wise. Both are the same. Pop socket does get in the way. The flap one obviously offers a bit more security. I generally take mine everywhere, like an extra limb, so I like to just use this one. I don't want to say whip it out because that sounds awful, but you know what I mean. There we go. So we've got a bit of elastic on this one to hold the flap in place. I don't like using hardware because I worry about damaging the screen. Elastic, mine has a little knot in it because this is as loose as an old pair of knickers. So I've just had to, after I made it, tie a little knot, but hopefully your elastic has a bit of a twang. Right, enough chit-chatting. Let's go. So we have two outer pieces, two lining pieces, and optional, you might have two flap pieces as well. What you want to do is fuse your fusible fleece to the wrong side of your outer pieces. If you haven't got fusible, sewing is fine. You will just need to make it the size of your piece, not smaller, and then sew it in. You can trim away the excess. You can lay it on by eye, or if you're not comfortable with that, what I've done is I've measured 1/2 inch in from each side, like so. Then I know that that's perfectly centered, and I can fuse this to the wrong size, but what I would do is I would fuse it from this side. Flap doesn't need any fleece, it's good as it is. What I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly press this, then we'll get into it. Like so. So I've got my two outer pieces, fleece in place. If you are not doing a flap, you might want to just skip ahead. I've got my two flap pieces. I've got one of outer fabric, one of lining. Now again, I like guidelines. There's no shame in drawing on your fabric pieces. So I've got my fabric marker and I've measured the seam allowance so that I know where to stop and turn when I'm sewing, and I get these nice even symmetrical points. Lay them right sides together. Clip them together if you wish. I should add a couple in. And then sew them together using your seam allowance, but leave this top edge open for turning it in a moment. And once you've sewn them together, I'm just going to cut off about 1/2 of the seam allowance. And I've also, as you can see, I've trimmed off the points for the bulk. Turn this right side out. Now grab object of your choosing to push the points out. And then if your fabric allows, you can give it a nice good press. There you go, nice press. Obviously if you can't press it, you could use clips to hold it in place. And I'm going to top stitch all around, including this turning gap at the top. There we go, so I've top stitched all around, including this top edge. So grab one of your outer pieces. And first thing first, we're going to put the elastic in, because it's a bit fiddly to do if the flap's already in place. So directionally, if you have a direction, make sure it's the right way up. That'll do. And oh, look, you can reflect. See, it was pouring down a minute ago. That lovely sky now. 2.5 inches down. That. This is our tuck for the flap. And what we're going to do is I'm going to sew them about 1/4 inch in, but using regular stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch because I want these to be secure. Like that. And then we can add the flap. So right sides together, so you want your accent outer fabric to go together. Center it on this top edge and base stitch them together like that. Now this is the part where we continue with both variations. I'm going to do them both at the same time as well. So directionally, make sure they're the right way up. So we know this one's the right way up because we've already done it. Yeah, I think I like that one that way. Lining, also directionally the right way up if it has a direction. And we're going to place them right sides together. And then I'm going to sew across this top here using seam allowance to sew these two pieces together, and then across the top here sewing these two pieces together. Make sure that your flap is sandwiched in between this top edge. So I've sewn them both together and then open them up like so. If your fabric allows, you can give them a press. If you're pressing, you want all of the seam allowances to be facing the lining. And generally the outer, you might find you've used thicker fabric, so it will naturally, that is where the seams naturally want to go. But if they don't, push them towards the lining. I'm going to give my little press. It just helps give a nice crisp top edge at the end. No. This next part's super easy. I'll place these right sides together. So you want the two outer body pieces together and the two lining pieces together. Make sure all the seam allowances are facing towards the lining, and match up this seam or these seams together as best you can. Now, when it comes to the lining, I don't know if you can hear that, my iron is going wild. And when it comes to the lining part, we need like a rough, I say rough, because it doesn't need to be perfecto. We need a turning gap. If you need a large turning gap, feel free to take this gap all the way over to here. But 4 inches is a nice good turning gap. What we're going to do is start at this one of your markers or one side of your turning gap. I'm going to sew these together all the way around and back here. We're not going to sew this bit. I'm going to leave it open using seam allowance. So we've got all the way around. We've left our turning gap open. I am going to reduce some bulk. So I'm taking off about half of the seam allowance again. When it comes to the elastic, if you've got any, avoid cutting those basting stitches that we did for the first. Because obviously there's no use putting them in if you're going to cut them off. I'm also not trimming the seam of my turning gap. I'm leaving that as is. So let's turn this. Don't worry too much about trying to make points with the corners. It looks better if they're not too pushed out anyways. Plus your Kindle will do what it wants to do when it's in the sleeve. So, got my turning gap and I'm just tucking in the raw edges. The beauty of this is it's not like a bag. It's not like you can see them. They're tucked away at the bottom. So my turning gap, I've tucked in the raw edges. And I'm going to sew this together. I'm going to try and get as close to the edge as I'm comfortable with. If you can't get too close, don't worry. Again, it's not going to be seen. It's going to be tucked in at the bottom. Like that. Then we can push this down. Down, down, down. But don't worry about trying to push it right into the corners. Like I said, the Kindle will do what it wants to do. So roll the top edge between your fingers, make sure it's nice and even. And what we're going to do is top stitch all the way around the top. Right here, with the flap up. We're not top stitching it down, we want it up out of the way. So top stitch all the way around. Like that. So top stitch all the way around. And all you need to do is bring your elastic round to the front side. And that's done. Super-duper easy. Obviously this one, as it is so much quicker because you don't have to worry about the flap. This is just 4 pieces sewn together. Bosh, done. One more. So I've got my next book lined up. Again, I've got real flimsy elastic on mine, so all I do is I just tie mine in a little knot. Don't want it to pull too much on the corners though. Ooh. There we go. That is it. Super duper easy, and that fits Paperwhite and smaller. Obviously the smaller versions won't be as snug in the open one, but they will be absolutely perfect in these because you've got the flap to keep them in. That's it. Any questions, please do ask. You will find the pattern for this in the Facebook group, which is in the description below. Please do answer the questions if you're wishing to join the group. Otherwise, there we have it.